So the ATF now faces another major lawsuit against their pistol brace rule. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Kershaw Knives. Kershaw manufactures amazing knives. You can get a broad range of knives and really it meets anyone's needs. You can get a $20 Walmart knife all the way up to a $200 US made automatic knife. One of Kershaw's top goals is to actually provide a value packed product backed by a limited lifetime warranty. I love their knives. I carry them every single day for my EDC. And recently Kershaw came out with a new 2023 line. And right now, if you go to their website and order using the code 20Scholar, you can get 20% off of your order and free shipping on orders of $100 or more. So thank you again to Kershaw Knives. If you guys are interested, you can go to their website and use that code. And thank you again to Kershaw Knives for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the ATF's new rule on stabilizing braces, which was published on January 31st. And currently there are lawsuits attempting to stop its enforcement. This new pistol brace rule makes it so that almost any pistol with a brace attached will now be considered to be an SBR and therefore subject to the NFA's restrictions. In response to the final rule being published, now multiple lawsuits have been filed against the ATF. The lawsuit we will be focusing on in this video is called SAF or Second Amendment Foundation versus the ATF or Merrick Garland. This lawsuit was a pre-existing lawsuit that has now been amended and is now addressing the language in the final pistol brace rule. In the SAF lawsuit, the plaintiff is seeking for the final rule to be found invalid under multiple different theories. The plaintiff asked for the court to enter a judgment halting the enforcement of the pistol brace rule and also a judgment finding that the brace rule is in fact unlawful. In the lawsuit, it's alleged that the final rule on pistol braces in fact violated the Administrative Procedures Act in multiple ways. In the first section, SAF argues that this pistol brace rule actually creates a statutory contradiction. They argue, by further defining rifle in accordance with the GCA and NFA, the arm brace rule redefines rifle in contradiction of both statutes. The NFA and GCA's statutory rifle definitions do not reach braced equipped pistols. Then in this section, we see SAF point to the recent 5th Circuit en banc panel ruling on bump stocks, and that is the Cargill case. In this section, SAF argues that 5th Circuit precedent points to the use of the rule of lenity instead of something like Chevron deference. SAF argues by promulgating the arm brace rule, the agencies also committed a final agency action that was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law, as well as in excess of statutory jurisdiction, authority, or limitations, or short of statutory right, by contradicting the rule of lenity. They go on to state that the rule of lenity applies here because the statutes at issue are at the best grievously ambiguous as to whether the rifle definition can cover a brace-equipped pistol. As a result, lenity dictates that agencies and courts alike are bound to construe Congress's enactment as not extending so far. This is important because you see SAF arguing that the court here should use a standard that is more favorable to us, the people, instead of just deferring to the ATF's interpretation. If you're not aware, Chevron deference refers to a case called Chevron, and Chevron deference is a term coined after that case, and it refers to judicial deference given to administrative actions like the ATF is doing here. Generally, for the ATF or an agency to be given Chevron deference, their interpretation of an ambiguous statute or term must be rational or reasonable. But first and foremost, the term has to be deemed ambiguous. In contrast to Chevron deference, the rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation or a criminal statutory interpretation of an ambiguous term or statute, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to the people, not the enforcement agency like the ATF. The interpretation of the definition of a rifle in SBR does involve criminal penalties, and therefore the argument is that the rule of lenity should be used, and that's very important. Second, SAF argues that the ATF violated the APA's rules by not properly considering the Supreme Court's recent ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. They argue that by promulgating the arm brace rule, the agencies committed a final agency action that was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law, because the agencies failed to consider all of the relevant factors and data. They go on to state, in particular, The agencies promulgated this rule without considering the Second Amendment's factors and data made relevant by New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Under Bruin, the agencies had to strictly, without means and scrutiny, consider whether the regulation is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation. Yet no such legally correct inquiry occurred. The agencies did not consider whether the arm brace rule addresses a general societal problem that has persisted since the 18th century, and if so, only whether there is a lack of a distinctly similar historical regulation addressing that problem. Nor did the agencies consider whether earlier generations addressed the societal problem, and if so, only whether they did so through materially different means. The agencies instead infected their Second Amendment analysis with the presumptions of legality and means and scrutiny that Bruin invalidates. This is a strong argument that is being made by SAF in the lawsuit. In this section, SAF is leveraging both the Bruin decision and also the APA's rules to show that the ATF's final rule on pistol braces is in fact invalid. The ATF violated the APA by not looking at relevant history and tradition as required by the Supreme Court in Bruin. Instead, the ATF continued along the general public interest grounds and means and scrutiny grounds, which the Supreme Court actually just struck down. The argument here is that the rule in no way adheres to the APA's requirements because they did not take into account that Bruin decision and also the relevant history and tradition which is required under Bruin. Finally, SAF then argues purely on Second Amendment grounds. They state, the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States forbids laws abridging the individual right to keep and bear arms. These requirements apply to the arm brace rule. By promulgating the arm brace rule and thereby redefining the statutory firearms laws in the term rifle, the agencies subjected plaintiffs to an unconstitutional abridgment of Second Amendment rights. The arm brace rule infringes the individual right to keep and bear arms and is inconsistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearms regulation. As such, it is an unconstitutional abridgment of Second Amendment rights. They go on to say that the arm brace rule or the pistol brace rule is impacting and regulating arms that are in common use and are not dangerous and unusual. This section points to various Supreme Court decisions like Heller, Bruin, and Caetano to show that these items are not, in fact, dangerous and unusual, and also that they are clearly in common use. And finally, that there is no historical analog to support this type of insane restriction on the use of these types of firearms. So those are the arguments presented by the plaintiffs in this case against the ATF and their new pistol brace rule. Awesome job by SAF. I really like the things that they do. I know a lot of the people in SAF now who work there. I used to work with them at FBC and now they're over at SAF filing these lawsuits and doing the right thing. So I highly recommend you support organizations like SAF who are engaging these types of lawsuits, trying to stop the ATF through the pistol brace rule, frames and receivers, and other lawsuits as well. If you're interested, I highly recommend you donate to SAF. I will leave a link down below in the details section, in the comment section. I get absolutely nothing from that, from you donating or becoming a member. It's just a way for you guys to actually engage with organizations that are fighting for our rights. So a lot of these lawsuits are now heading in the right direction. And if I get any more information on any of these lawsuits or this lawsuit as well, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.